Okay, yeah. So I'm Dan Rundy. I hold the Schreier Chair here at CSIS. It's a privilege to be co-hosting this with my friend Dr. Jones, who runs the Transnational Threats Program at CSIS. We're going to be having a conversation with the Ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan to the United States, Mr. Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry. Thank you very much for being here. He's a member of the Foreign Service of Pakistan with 37 years of experience in the Foreign Service. He was earlier the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan. He is a graduate of Tufts University, as well as from the Punjab University in Lahore. He's had a very interesting and distinguished career in the Foreign Service. Has had basically all the big jobs in the Foreign Service. Was ambassador to the Netherlands, and is really, we're very fortunate to have someone of his caliber representing Pakistan at this time. It's obviously a very challenging time for our relations between the United States and Pakistan. We wanted to have this conversation with the ambassador. I think everyone is aware of all of that, but I think we think so I think we need to talk about the challenges in our relationship and the things that need to be addressed. And then I think we want to also have a conversation that opens up the conversation a bit, because I think there's a number of things that don't get enough attention, don't get enough attention at all. So we're gonna, I'm going to turn the floor over first to the ambassador to say some remarks. Then we're going to have an armchair conversation. Ambassador, please come on up. It's an honor to have you. Please welcome the ambassador.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ambassador. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for coming to this session. And thank you, Dan and Seth, for organizing this event. And it would be my pleasure to share with you my own thoughts on a topic that you have suggested to us. In the last 1 month, a lot has happened. So I'd like to actually start from that. Last month, you all recall that the United States government the present administration has unveiled its national security strategy, which has given the United States a set of priorities and identified three-tier ladder of threats to the United States, the top of which is occupied by China and Russia. And then it goes down the ladder to Iran and North Korea, and then to jihadi organizations. This has been further elaborated by a national defense strategy announced last week, where it was revealed that interstate strategic competition and not terrorism will be the primary concern for the US administration. And they identified again China and Russia as the revisionist powers, antithetical to US interests, and trying to displace United States as a preeminent power in Asia. It also, of course, reinforces that Iran and North Korea will remain a threat because they are pursuing weapons of mass destruction and terrorism. It appears that the major power rivalry is setting in, intensifying, picking up. Has it happened suddenly? Were these two announcements made out of US own calculations, or was it part of a dynamic that was building up? I believe it was the latter. I think this was already in the making. And in the last couple of years, especially in the last 2 years, considerable literature appeared suggesting that the unipolar world led by United States is giving way to multipolarity. You all remember Richard Haas came up with that thesis that the world was in disarray. meaning to suggest that the Second World War, post-Second World War world order was now in flux, about to change. He didn't know what it will come out to be. Then Graham Allison, he came up with the prediction that United States and China might actually be destined for war. That's the topic of his book, invoking Thucydides' trap, unless they come up with courageous and painful decisions not to enter that trap. We have had another book by Kurt Campbell on, I think it was The Pivot, the future of American statecraft in Asia, where he also talked at a great length on the new rebalance in South Asia, in Asia. Slightly earlier, before that, Lee Kuan Yew, the long-time statesman from Singapore, had suggested that China's rise will not be just another player in the world, but perhaps the biggest player, I'm using his words, in the history. And that would require a whole new balance or rebalance. I think former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd also had to say something similar to that, where he said that the spectacular progress made by China is like English Industrial Revolution and Global Information Revolution simultaneously combusting and compressed into not 300 years but 30 years. And that would require accommodation. So that means that it hasn't really happened suddenly that the United States had reorganized its priorities, because it could feel that the time had come for them to make an adjustment and see what is happening. So many people had already started talking about a competition, if you want to use that term, or perhaps even rivalry, from a rising China and a resurgent Russia. But was it only in the strategic domain that this change was happening? I think that change is happening in many other domains too. Look, for example, free trade or international trade, for which for decades we learned that free trade is the best for everyone. It is a win-win solution. It is now under threat from protectionist tendencies, protectionism. Immigration or immigrants, which for centuries, I would say, was always considered as infusion of fresh blood in a society and were welcomed to mingle and learn from each other, is now being viewed in some circles as economic or security threat. The global consensus on climate change, for instance, is also under question marks. Nationalism, which for 19th century and greater first half of 20th century was a major issue. So narrow nationalism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, and the likes are also now raising their heads. So clearly the world is changing, has changed. We still don't know where it will finally settle. It's in flux. It's in turbulence. Now, if I zoom in to my own region, South Asia, where my country is located, I don't see the situation much different. India and China, the two big countries in that region, are what I would call uneasy peace. India and Pakistan simply don't talk to each other. Afghanistan, the situation continues to deteriorate with every passing year, in fact now by passing month. And Iran, the nuclear deal that was negotiated so painstakingly after a long time, and people used to herald that as a victory of diplomacy, is also under question marks. So in a world which is changing, and we don't know where actually it would head, but certainly more turbulent, in a region, South Asia again, the turbulence is visible. The broader Middle East region continues to grapple with the threat of terrorism. How has my country, Pakistan, done? So when I measure it in that larger context, I believe that Pakistan has not done bad. We were in the eye of the storm and remained there for a decade and a half. And we know that there was hardly a day when we would get up and not worry where is the next explosion that has happened. How did we come to face such a terrible situation where these militants turned their guns towards Pakistan? Long story, I don't want to go into that. But the fact is that the nation of Pakistan in the last couple of years first forged a consensus that terrorism and violence under any pretext is not acceptable. And then they went on to the military action to take these people out. Today, we can very proudly say that the tide of terrorism has been reversed. The militants and the terrorists are on the run. We are chasing them, and we will continue to do that. But is our job over? Certainly not. Because the mindset that which gives rise to these extremists to pick up arms is still there, and we need to deal with that, and we will deal with them. So that's the situation that Pakistan has done in the last 2 years, 3 years. We think that we have achieved a commendable success against these formidable enemies of Pakistan. Law and order has improved, which has had a salutary effect on the economic situation. Investment is pouring in from all across, of course, most of all from China, but also from Europe and elsewhere, and corporate America. So we think that we are on the right track. Our destination is still very far because there is a lot of work that is still to be done. All our gains would be at risk and will remain tentative unless Afghanistan next door stabilizes. And that's where I would like to bring in my relations of my country with the United States. This relationship is very important to us, has always been for the last 7 decades, and we believe that it must be preserved and strengthened. Currently, it is under stress, I must admit. But I believe this is because in the United States sometimes the country is looked at from one lens or the other. Sometimes we are viewed through the lens of Afghanistan, that since the United States is not making progress in Afghanistan, could actually be up against a failure. Perhaps it is because of Pakistan, and therefore tendency to view Pakistan in that narrow lens. Sometimes it is viewed through the lens of China, that China, which is now an emerging rival for the United States, perhaps Pakistan being close to China, is not going to be friendly with the United States. Sometimes it is viewed through the lens of India, that India now is a strategic partner for the United States and is expected by the United States to play a larger role in the Indo-Pacific region. And since Pakistan is not on good terms with India, therefore, Pakistan perhaps is not worthwhile to maintain relations. And sometimes it's also viewed purely from counterterrorism lens or security lens. I believe this is a very narrow approach to a country the size of Pakistan and the potential of Pakistan. The topic that Dan has given me, beyond the lens or broadening the lens, I think is so apt and relevant, because Pakistan should be seen for what it is and not through these four lenses that I talked about. And that would happen if the relationship is viewed for what actually it is. There are two levels to see how Pakistan and US have built their relationship. One is the G2G or government to government level, and the other is P2P or people to people level. I think while the G2G relationship has oscillated between ups and downs, the P2P relationship has been pretty steady. And there have been a number of areas in which the people of Pakistan and people of the United States remain connected, have remained connected, regardless of the relationship between the two governments. Yes, if it helps enormously, the P2P relationship, if the G2D relationship is also positive, no doubt about it. But I was telling you in the other small room that even today, the United States remains the most attractive destination for Pakistani students. The United States is the home to a large body of Pakistani physicians, many of whom are interested that their next generation should continue to come to this country and serve here. The United States has been a steady partner. Very few people know about it in the field of agriculture. We are an agrarian country. Starting from 50s and 60s, when US was our partner in producing green revolution in Pakistan, until now, when some of the leading universities here are still actually very actively engaged with some agricultural universities of Pakistan. IT sector, another, we have a youth bulge. And I know millions of Pakistani youth are connected virtually with Silicon Valley and contributing to the development of technology-based software. And so on and so, I could go on. It still remains a large trading partner for Pakistan. But all this tends to get on the side because the conversations tend to reduce to one or lens or the other. And it remains a security-driven relationship. The core issue at this time, which is causing distrust between Pakistan and the United States, is Afghanistan, where the United States has invested billions in treasure, but also in blood. But unfortunately, the situation is deteriorating, and some would say is close to what it was around 9/11. So the United States had set for itself an objective that never again would they allow the soil of Afghanistan to be used as a sanctuary or safe haven by militants who could then plan events like 9/11. So that was the stated objective for the United States to be there. Is it any closer there or not? Is there a military solution to Afghan problem? How should we really move forward? Is Pakistan really responsible for the failure in Afghanistan? All these are the questions that I would leave for the Q&A session, because I was given the timetable of 10 to 15 minutes to speak, so therefore I would not go there. Why has the relationship between Pakistan and the United States oscillated so much? Why has it been roller coaster? I think we've got to need to really explore as to what is it, and how is it that we can broaden it, strengthen it, what new areas can we bring in, and how can we broaden that lens that Dan is talking about. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Please join us here. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague and new friend, Dr. Seth Jones. Dr. Jones, you have the first question.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments. It's an honor to welcome you to CSIS. You're actually, you've beaten me by about 2.5 weeks since I just started here. So welcome. We're in many ways on the same turf. Let me begin by, you're a graduate of Fletcher School at Tufts University. And for those of you in the audience that don't know, the mascot at Tufts is the elephant, or the jumbo. So before we move on to a whole range of questions, I'm going to raise the elephant in the room, and then we'll deal with a whole range of issues: regional trade, peace negotiations, and other issues. But let me first turn to the issue of Pakistan's support to militants, and I think your response here would be helpful, in part because it's been a subject of this town for quite some time. I mean, I think there's no question that as one looks at the last decade and a half, Pakistan has made countless sacrifices. There is no question about that, in blood and treasure. You noted the U.S. experiences in Afghanistan. In its struggle against militants. I was in Pakistan, for example, as I told you earlier, during parts of the SWAT campaign. Saw that up and close. Am very cognizant of the thousands of Pakistan soldiers, police, civilians, intelligence professionals that have died over the past several years, and that the civilians that have had to deal with bombings in Lahore and Peshawar and Islamabad, Karachi, and other cities. Yet, certainly around this town, both Democratic and Republican governments and senior officials from U.S. agencies continue to point the finger at Pakistan for providing, particularly ISI, support to some groups, certainly not all. They raise issues of Afghan Taliban and Haqqani network, which have their command and control structures on the Pakistan side of the border. If I quote President Trump from one of his recent tweets, they give safe haven to the terrorists we hunt in Afghanistan with little help, no more, the U.S. president said recently. I think also it's probably worth noting that U.S. officials will also argue that Pakistan officials will regularly deny this support in public and in private, but that few may actually believe this line. So I want to give you a chance to respond to these concerns and these issues with at least support to some militant groups. To be fair, all states, including the United States, do provide support to some state and non-state actors. I am well aware of that from my own personal background in the U.S. military. So can't we have an honest discussion about this? So how do you respond to this broader discussion and Pakistan's support on the Afghan side in particular?
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Let's try to trace the roots of how Pakistan came into contact or into encounter with the militancy. Until 1979, there was no such thing as militants in Pakistan. We were living about our own life. But when 1979 Soviet forces came into Afghanistan, the United States and Pakistan, perhaps together or perhaps at US suggestion, came up with the concept of Afghan jihad. So that's where militancy was born, and madrasas were created all over to provide an army of militants who would fight the infidels, the communists. Once the Soviets left, these people stayed back in Afghanistan. And after 9/11, once again, United States came to focus on that area and Tora Bora and other places were bombed heavily, and so many of them crossed the open, treacherous border towards Pakistan. And Pakistan was asked to make a choice whether it wants to be part of the international coalition to fight them or not. And Pakistan made that choice, and thereby the militants thought that Pakistan was now a legitimate target for their activity. And that is the time about 2000, 2003, that militants began to turn their guns towards Pakistan. And hardly a day would pass when they would not attack one facility or installation or the other, and bulk of it on the security establishments, either on the military or the intelligence facilities or their personnel. From 2004 to 2014, all hell broke loose. We used to have 150 terrorist incidents per month on the average, until the nation said that enough is enough. And all the politicians, they got together, held a series of political conferences between June of 2013 and June of 2014, and forged a national consensus that we would not allow any terrorists to remain in Pakistan, nor we would allow anyone to use Pakistan's soil to commit terrorism anywhere. In pursuit of this national consensus, the military moved in. The military would not have moved in without this consensus, because otherwise they would have faced some resistance from the ground. I want to also tell you that the militants who came to tribal areas had a very simple narrative, which somehow at that time found a lot of traction in the local population. The narrative was that Afghanistan was occupied by the communists, and we got rid of them, and today it is being occupied by Americans, and we will get rid of that. So that was a simple narrative, and that this is a holy duty called jihad, and therefore support us. And you had to have an equally strong, simple but strong and effective counter narrative to expose the flawed nature of that narrative. Because why I say flawed is because if you are killing innocent people on the streets and in the schools, that means that it is not holy duty. It is outright militancy or terrorism. And they themselves provided an opportunity for us to build that counterterrorism when they attacked a school in Peshawar, killing 137 school children of those Pakistani soldiers and officers who were fighting them in the mountains, to send a message to them that you are our enemy. And therefore, when they moved in not only because they had to do it as a national duty, but it became a passionate duty to rid ourselves from these menace and evil people. And that is why not a single discordant voice from far right of the political spectrum came. And we almost swept through the whole area. And we cleaned up all those hideouts and sanctuaries and IED factories and whatever else was there. And today, if you don't hear any such or don't see any such sanctuary or safe haven, it is because we were able to eliminate that. So when somebody turns around and tells us that there are safe havens existing there, we say to them, please show us where. It's an open challenge. It's been 10 months or so we have been saying. Please show us. We will ourselves like to eliminate if somebody is hiding in any caves in Pakistan. And if somebody says that your military or your intelligence is actually playing a double game and supporting these militants, and I would ask them that go and meet those officers and soldiers who have lost their children and their loved ones in the attacks by militants, and then you tell me that they would allow their own fellow servicemen to support those people who kill their children. No, sir. It's not so. But Pakistan is happy, we are happy. We paid a huge price, 6,000 soldiers and officers and 23,000 civilians, but we are happy. We're still happy because we were able to defeat them, put them on the run, and they are on the run. And those who need to know, they know it. That bulk of them have gone to Afghanistan, and we will push the remaining, those who are hiding anywhere, also to Afghanistan. They are Afghans. The Taliban and the Haqqanis are Afghans, and they belong there. Our message to them is that you should join the political mainstream in Afghanistan. You should not be in Pakistan. We will squeeze all the space on you that we will, by denying them accommodation or facilities or health or whatever else. And they are very much going there. But since we keep hearing this from some of the security authorities, it lends the people of Pakistan to believe that perhaps we are being scapegoated for the failures in Afghanistan. Look at the contrast. In the last 4 years, we have improved the situation, and Afghanistan, according to your own reports of SIGAR, every 6 months, the territory that is under the control of the Afghan forces is going into the hands of the militants. And today it is more than 43% of that territory, huge territory. Why would the Taliban and the Haqqanis live in Pakistan where we are breathing down their neck, and not live in Afghanistan where they have 43% of territory to plan whatever they need to plan? Talking of money, they are not short of funds, because the drug trade in Afghanistan is booming. $400 million. It has increased according to your own reports from SIGAR. Only in 1 year, 43% increase. And since 9/11, 3,400 times it has grown. And then there are other players which have come in, who are ready to work with them. So when we compare the two situations, Pakistan and Afghanistan, people in Pakistan say that, why are we being blamed continuously for failures in Afghanistan? Are we really responsible for those failures? Is the failure only because they think that certain Taliban and Haqqanis live in Pakistan? Is that really the sum total of the problem in Afghanistan? What about issues of governance and corruption and drug trade and high desertion rate from Afghan national security forces, who go and turn into the other side along with their weaponry? And the statistics of green on green attacks and green on blue attacks, which are growing according to a SIGAR report. I'm not quoting anything from my Pakistani sources. So I think people then feel that perhaps we are the bogeyman that has to explain why $680 billion in Afghanistan have not solved the problem, and another recurring $21 billion annual. So these are the questions which are coming up. And we are having those conversations with the security, and we're constantly telling them that, look, you want peace in Afghanistan, we want it even more than you. Because when Soviets left, they just left. And when you would leave, you would just leave. It's us who will be left holding the bag. It's us who suffered from that waves of refugees who continue to live in Pakistan 38 years down the line, 3 million of them. And the Kalashnikov culture, and the drugs, and what have you. And today, those refugee camps are being used by these militants to recruit Afghan, terrorists to create trouble in Pakistan. Therefore, what we are saying to the United States, that you want to stabilize Afghanistan because it's a long war, you want to really do that. We believe that that's your stated objective and that's your real objective. And for Pakistan also, we want to see Afghanistan stabilize because we will suffer from it if it does not stabilize. So please do not scapegoat us. Do not place all the burden on us for these failures. We want to work with you because we think that there's work to be done. We think that Afghanistan needs help and stability, and we are ready to work with you, but we will not take the blames wholehearted blames, full blames on Pakistan.
Thank you, Ambassador. I want to just signal to the audience that we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking cards and taking questions from Q&A. We're going to write them up. We're going to have a conversation for about a half an hour among the three of us. So if you have questions, we're going to collect them, and then we will read them, and we'll read about 4 or 5 or 6 of them. We'll collect 5 or 6 of them, so I'm very open to doing that. So if you can be, I think we've handed that out. So, Ambassador, let me ask you a couple-pronged question. I think when I've said to my friends and colleagues, I think we need to have a broader conversation with Pakistan. Many people say, Dan, you're crazy. Why do you want to work on this issue? Why do you want to work with Pakistan? There's a lot of distrust in official Washington. So everything I heard you say, I know that you're speaking with great passion and great and belief, and I believe you. But there is very little trust here in Washington, and I think it's reciprocated in Pakistan. There's very low trust between our two governments, and that there is even so little trust that even official statements sometimes are not being believed. So what do we do about a situation when we don't trust each other, A, and B, is it fair to say, is it possible to say that what's going to happen is that the Pakistani, is it one thing for the civilian government to say one thing, and is there a different, I know I heard you say very forcefully about, and I know that there is a before and after what happened in 2014 in Pakistan when those school children were killed, the children of those soldiers were killed. There was a watershed moment in Pakistan. I know that for a fact. But there are many people who say, well, there's one thing for the civilian government to say something, that there's the Pakistan deep state, and so so what's your reaction to this issue of trust?
We both have deep states, by the way.
Okay.
Just
right, exactly. It's become an overly used term recently in our discourse in the U.S. But that there's sort of just this issue of trust, and is part of this issue of trust. Is it fair to say that? What do you say if someone says, well, it's one thing for the civilian government of Pakistan to say something, that there's a whole other game going on? What's your reaction to that?
Well, I have heard this
Yeah.
so many times, but it is not true. And we have repeatedly made it a point to clear to our US interlocutors that you need, and you will hear the one and only narrative that was built. To prove the point, when Secretary Tillerson visited Pakistan a couple of months ago, the entire civil and military leadership sat together to meet him. So that this view, which is often propelled in the US by vested interests to drive a wedge between Pakistani civil and military authorities, is addressed. This time around, when President Trump made a tweet on the eve of New Year, we decided not to respond that day at any individual level.
I'm sure it was a very long day for you. I'm just guessing. It was probably a long day.
It was afternoon, late afternoon in Pakistan. So next day, the National Security Committee, which comprises of the top leadership on civil and military, they prepared a measured and restrained response to that. I think gone are the days when people can say that, all right, we can drive this wedge and sell our narrative. No, sir, it's not going to happen, because government and people of Pakistan are very conscious now that this is what certain lobbyists try to do. So we are saying to you, whatever, it comes now directly from the full endorsement of both civil and military leadership, and most of these statements that we have now issued, including the response to August 21 strategy, South Asia strategy by President Trump, also from the same forum, National Security Committee. The people of Pakistan are highly proud of our armed forces and our other security authorities for the peace that they have returned to the people of Pakistan. We had always felt that this war was not our war, it was imposed on us. But having been imposed, the leadership decided, all right, if it is imposed, let's bring it on. And we did. So I think today you cannot find even a minor cleavage between the two. We are all speaking with one voice. So what is our message? You started the question with trust.
Trust.
The message that we have is that, look, we mean well, that we need peace in Afghanistan. We have achieved successes against terrorists in Pakistan. We can repeat, or the international community can repeat and learn those lessons and repeat them in Afghanistan. We think that a peaceful Afghanistan will serve us well. We think that United States and Pakistan can work together just like we had worked together and achieved common milestones. If you don't hear about Al-Qaeda today, an organization which was responsible for 9/11, it is because Pakistan and United States worked together day in and day out in the first decade after 9/11 to eliminate that Al-Qaeda. There is no reason why the two countries should not continue in the same spirit to finish up what was started. But if the path chosen is not this, not working together, but some other path, whatever it is, I'm afraid the pursuit of the shared objectives of peace in Afghanistan and defeat of terrorism will not be able to make that much more progress. So therefore, I think this is the message that is coming out of the civilian leadership and military leadership of Pakistan, that look, we have been partners, we achieved a lot, and we need to work together to finish up what you started or what was started in Afghanistan. That's the message that we are trying to convey. Not to apportion blame by one against the other.
I want to turn to trade issues, both regional trade and also broader global trade. If one looks at some of the more significant initiatives in the region, we can take a look, for example, at China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is significant, includes upwards of 68 countries, 4.4 billion people, 40% of the world's gross domestic product, network of everything from rails and roads to pipelines, ports, and projects. And one important component of that is the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So I wonder if you could lay out, at least from your standpoint, what Pakistan's vision is for regional trade, and how that sits particularly with the role of China. You know, as you noted earlier, the national security strategy here and the national defense strategy now both label, from Washington's standpoint, China as a competitor. Mm-hmm. So what's the vision for regional trade, and how does that sit then with U.S. development efforts with a country that is now viewed increasingly, at least by the government here, as a competitor? How do you think through those issues?
Certainly. China has always been a friend of Pakistan ever since China became an independent country. Not once ever there was any shallow point. And the relationship has continued, but mostly at the political level. The translation of political goodwill into tangible economic cooperation has happened only very recently. The genesis of the economic transformation and the shifting of priorities ever since President Xi came to power is important to understand and to bear in mind. While the Chinese for 3 decades were experiencing an export-led growth, when President Xi came to power, probably 2013, I think there was shift of emphasis to mobilize domestic consumers and for equity in the investments and economic development of the people. And it came to light that the western part of China was far less developed than eastern part of China, where each of the port city was exporting billions of dollars of worth of goods. And therefore, the emphasis began to shift towards the western part of China. About the same time, we had a change of government in Pakistan from one democratically elected government to another democratically elected government. And the present government, which is completing its term this summer, came up with this idea that what if the Chinese are focusing on the western part of China and we have economic priorities and these get linked. The idea of China-Pakistan economic corridor had been, in a way, at a conceptual stage existed, but there were mighty big Hindu Kush and Himalayas mountains which had prevented that. But the two governments took on the challenge and started connecting across these mountains, these two regions, Western China and Pakistan. It was a win-win option for Pakistan and a win-win option for China. For China, because for Western China, if you want to come to the Persian Gulf and on to through the Red Sea to Mediterranean, you would probably go over the land for 5,000 kilometers and then through the Malacca state another 8,000 kilometers to come here. Whereas from Kashgar down to Gwadar port is 2,000 kilometers. So it would make perfect sense, economic sense, that you utilize this link to reach to the sea routes that would link China to Europe and Gulf. So that is what actually pushed both governments to move in that direction. It was also the underlying emphasis that the net gain will not be restricted only to the people of Pakistan and people of Western China. But in good time, this should blossom east and west and should bring prosperity to all. In fact, already there is a talk of extending it westward to Afghanistan, should Afghanistan become peaceful. Because if you go up north from Gwadar, the first region to benefit is Kandahar region of Afghanistan. So it makes perfect economic sense to get into that project. This, of course, did not mean that roads only. It meant a whole lot of avenues of connectivity that included road and rail and fiber optics and pipelines and whatever else that falls in the domain of connectivity. It is still happening. Bulk of our deficits at that time, 4 years ago, were in energy and infrastructure. With massive investments, most of these investments are now almost completed. We used to have what we used to call load shedding, which means blackouts for good about 15 to 16 hours a day is down to zero.
In the entire country?
Yeah. And we used to have these roads, motorways and links, and only in Balochistan, 1,100 kilometers of paved, beautiful roads have been built. Entire FATA has new sets of roads. By the way, where I would like to, actually I should have brought that book. I'd like to show how US and Pakistan worked together to change the entire area.
So that's because of the United States?
That's with cooperation from the United States.
In partnership with the United States.
It's something that is little known. Even in the energy sector, the United States is already a partner with Pakistan and China in many of the projects. Most of the energy projects which are being done by Chinese or by the Pakistanis themselves, General Electric is providing the turbines and other technology. In the last few months alone, 80 American companies have gone ahead and taken registration under the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. They all are situating themselves to benefit from the bonanza that is about to come out.
Ambassador, just to share for this group, what was the growth rate in 2017, or just the last couple of years, because I don't think people know?
I think the growth rates have continuously improved from 3% or so in 2013 to now the prediction is 6%, according to World Bank.
For
and IMF.
2018.
Yeah.
Last year it was over 5%
It
in
was
2017.
5%, 5.3%, I think. And now the prediction is 6%. Now, it has been a constant trajectory. With these massive investments, we are now moving on to make 9 special economic zones all along the corridor from Western China to Pakistan. And we think that it would be very helpful if the United States stay engaged. In fact, regardless of what the US government thinks, the corporate America is already making up its own mind. And they are there, and we want them there. Because simultaneously, while we had these good relations with China, there was all along a belief that people like me have, that our relations with China and our relations with the United States are not a zero-sum game. That we have had relations with China since 1949 when it gained independence, and we have had relations with the United States since 1947 when the United States became the first country to set up its its embassy in Pakistan. So I think we go back in time. We do not see that as zero-sum game. We think that the United States should stay engaged. We should stay engaged. There are millions of ways in which we have stayed engaged, and economic investment is the most important one.
Ambassador, I want to just pause for a second and say, my friend Chris Metzger, who's here, is going to be collecting cards. So if he's going to walk down the
got his hand
aisle,
up in the back.
and so can you walk down the aisle here, Chris, and collect cards right now, over the next couple minutes or so, because we're going to turn to, I need to collect those cards and sort out questions, so people have them, just get them from Mr. Metzger. All right, I want to turn to, if I may, just the issue. There's an election coming up. This is an election year in Pakistan. Mm-hmm. There's several things I want to mention about this. One is that there has been a reduced, there's a perception in the United States of heavy military engagement in the society, both economically and politically in Pakistan. But it's notable in my mind that there have been several moments where the military has not left its barracks. So the one thing is that for the first time since 1947, there was a democratic transition from one democratically elected government to another democratically elected government in Pakistan. That had not happened before. And you referenced it earlier, Ambassador. I think it's something to note and very important that I don't think many Americans appreciate. And so and there have been several moments when the military could have come out of their barracks and done something anti-democratic in the sense of having a coup, and that has not happened. So then, Ambassador, I think correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm up on Pakistani current events. There was a number of judicial decisions made in the last 12 months about the leadership in Pakistan, and the current democratically government's mandate, although is ending in several months. So could you just comment a little bit on sort of the current domestic political situation, given what I've just described, and what do you expect? Do you want to? I'm not necessarily sure. I want to ask you what your bet is, what's going to happen in the elections, but if you could just talk about a little bit of, could you comment?
But you can
a
if you
bit?
want.
You can if you want, because I don't know if there are bets in UK betting parlors about this, but if you could just talk a little bit about sort of the elections that are coming, and what does that mean in terms of some of the things that we've been talking about here? What does it mean in terms of the economic opportunities? What could it mean in terms of what does it mean on a number of different fronts? Because I think it is important, and if just going back to what you're saying, if there's an alignment of the civilian government and the military government, and there's a national consensus on things like terrorism, there's certain things we should expect not to change, but there may be some things that could change.
I think the grain of people of Pakistan is democratic. The reason for that is that the person who led the struggle for the independence of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Quaid-e-Azam, great leader that we call him out of respect, he was a man deeply committed to rule of law. He was a barrister, and he led the entire political struggle in a democratic fashion. And therefore, it is deeply ingrained that we have to follow that route. It is true, unfortunately, that our democratic process was interrupted 4 times, but the people of Pakistan have become wiser that that was not in the in the advantage of Pakistan. So since 2008, the first government completed its term. The second is all, likely to complete its term.
It's very likely to complete its term.
I think it's almost there. But then there are also lessons that people of Pakistan are beginning to learn from this. They are beginning to learn that democratic processes are noisy by definition, everywhere. And we are no exception. But noisy does not mean disruption. And second, they have been repeatedly assured now by the civil and military leadership combined that the only path forward for Pakistan is the democratic elections. So I have personally met the entire leadership, both civil and military, and I came out stronger in my conviction that everybody wants this democratic process to continue. I'm also, being ambassador to the United States, I believe that this is yet another area which endears the people of my country with the people of the United States. The values of democracy and rule of law and freedom and liberty that your country has advocated for good over 240 years is a beacon of light for everyone, including my people, because they also believe in these values, which are, I think, supreme values of democracy and freedom and rule of law. And I think we are moving in that direction. We yearn to move in that direction, and we are getting there. As to who would make it,
I'm hanging on your every word here, Ambassador.
No problem, because I will not be an ambassador if I've answered you this question. No, because of course I believe in voting. I voted last time, and I will probably vote this time too.
Of course. Can you vote overseas if you're
The government servants can. We get our option about a month or two in advance, and we are able to do that. We are trying to work how overseas Pakistanis can also vote, because there's a big demand for that. I don't know whether Election Commission can manage that, but certainly we are all excited about elections. I think that should happen. That's the only way democratic governance should go forward.
Okay.
Yep. And I think we'll get to Q&A in a second. Two-part question. First one is really brief. Based on your answer to our the question about regional trade in China, what is your response, or probably better put, what was Pakistan's response then to the withholding of aid? In the broader context, it is a tiny drop. So how do you respond to and what was the response in general to the U.S. decision temporarily to freeze aid? And more broadly, I think your broader issue that you noted up on peace in the region is important, and I wanted to turn to that real briefly, because what I'd be interested in, I think people here would be interested in, what are your thoughts specifically on steps of how Pakistan, the Afghan government, and the U.S. might take to ensure peace in Afghanistan? It is driving the drug trade, it is driving militancy. So what are your prospects for peace? What role should Pakistan play? What about other regional players, Afghanistan, India, China? Is the U.S. doing enough to support a peace process? So just to remind you, the first one is about the U.S. decision to withhold aid and Pakistan's reaction, and the second, specific steps on the peace settlement side.
Certainly, we think that the figure of aid that was quoted in the tweet, which is $33 billion, half of it was in respect of the reimbursements that the United States was to make to Pakistan in lieu of the expenses that we had incurred ourselves in pursuit of common predetermined objectives to fight terrorism. Because the rationale at that time was, which was presented to the Congress and Congress approved, was that there'll be burden sharing, and otherwise the United States would itself be doing the same at a much greater cost. But that reimbursement even has been withheld on one ground or the other. So to that extent, about $1 billion is an amount that US owes to Pakistan. Then there is a component of economic assistance, which has counter narcotics, health sector, education, and others. And then there is security cooperation of about $8.5 billion. Bulk of the economic assistance has, over the years, now I'm talking of for a long time, that this assistance has also gone through non-governmental channels, through the NGOs and INGOs, and through international agencies. So the government and the people of Pakistan actually don't know where that money was being spent. In fact, many of the INGOs, and there's a big reaction now against those INGOs as to what is it that they were doing in Pakistan. So, frankly, nobody in Pakistan has commented about this suspension of aid. We have actually said that we don't need aid. Our leadership has said it in as many words, and has said that what we need is not this kind of transactional relationship, but a relationship based on mutual respect and mutual trust. So that's our response to this aid phenomena. The other, what is it that we can do together to bring peace in Afghanistan? We think that we first must come out with a conclusion that there is no military solution. If there was a military solution, it would have come by when 150,000 troops with a sufficiently long period and a pretty well-resourced effort would have achieved. We think that that is not the route that should be taken. We think that a comprehensive political solution in Afghanistan is required, which basically means that allow the people of Afghanistan to engage in a serious reconciliation process. All the nations all across the world that you would come across have gone on that route and found their own truth. In fact, there is already a book, somebody was giving a reference to that in one of the analyses, by Max Boot, The Road Not Taken, which was a biography of a CIA operative, I think his name was Edward Lansdale,
yeah,
who had advised against use of force in Vietnam and suggested that a peace agreement be made and United States withdraw, but his advice was not taken, and 58,000 American lives and millions of Vietnamese lives later, this is exactly what happened, and the people of Vietnam were able to build that peace, make economic progress, and become a friend of the United States, which it is today. So many people feel that this is a route that US could perhaps take in Afghanistan, where the people of Afghanistan are yearning for peace. Since 1979, it's been almost 40 years that they have been suffering some kind of military solution which is being found. So you need to have a genuine political reconciliation where Afghan government should take charge of it. It should be Afghan-led and Afghan-owned. And the people of Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, the government of the United States, and the government of China must support that process. Second, we should also focus on border management between Pakistan and Afghanistan. We don't want that the people that we are pushing towards Afghanistan, Taliban and Haqqanis, whom we believe are Afghans and should join the political mainstream in Afghanistan, should come back. And in any case, there are bad guys who live and cross border and can do bad things. And therefore, we got to interdict that movement, cross-border movement. So Pakistan has already started on our own on this humongous project, 2,600 kilometers long border. This is the kind of I have flown over those mountains. I don't know when you were in Afghanistan, you did or not. They are treacherous mountains. It's not easy. Only 800 is fencible, 800 kilometers. We have started that. We started in 2016. We should be done by 2022. And then we'll be setting up 900 posts to patrol the border. But we cannot do it alone. We need support from Afghanistan and US side to do the same on the other side of the border, because it is as much their responsibility as it is ours. We also believe that part of the solution is to allow the Afghan refugees to go back. It's been long. We are proud of that hospitality that we extended, but 38 years, 3 million. And now there is a security dimension. That should also be a part of the solution, I believe. And I think there should be a regional consensus not to use Afghan soil to achieve your own political objectives. For example, India has been given a role by United States in Afghanistan, which we believe India is using to create a double squeeze situation against Pakistan. For India, Pakistan is the issue, and therefore they think that our 200,000 troops engaged on the western border will remain engaged with that much less pressure on them on the eastern border if Afghanistan remains on the boil, or if Afghanistan can be used by their spies and others to create instability in Pakistan. So we think that there has to be a regional consensus not to allow anyone to use Afghan soil to create instability or to advance their own political agendas. I think that is also an equally important part if you want to really attain peace in Afghanistan.
All right, Ambassador, I've got several questions from the audience. This first one relates to this issue of, is there a time frame set up for Afghan refugees to return to Afghanistan? You made reference to it in your answer here.
I am not aware of that, but we issue what is called registration cards to them, those of them who live in the refugee camps. More than half of them do. That card enables them to receive some kind of stipend money to continue their life. But that limit is expiring soon of that card. And we think that there should be serious negotiations between US government, Pakistan government, Afghan government, and UNHCR to make arrangement for them to go and live in Afghanistan, their own lands. And the money that they receive here as stipend should be given to them there to build their lives. But for that, push factor is not enough. In fact, it's not a desirable factor. There should be a pull factor in Afghanistan. How do you create that? When President Ashraf Ghani came to power, he had made references to giving land ownership rights to those who come back. I think that would be a great pull factor, but I don't know whether that has been followed through. Together with international community using its resources to allow them to settle in Afghanistan, I think that will benefit everybody. Otherwise, if Afghanistan remains unstable and these Afghans continue to run for their life, many will come to Pakistan, others will go to Europe, and others will go elsewhere. I think it is only fair to the people of Afghanistan that we take a very sympathetic view of this situation and help them.
So let me stay on this issue of the Afghan issue, and we've talked about it throughout this conversation. There's two questions for you, Ambassador. President Trump urges Pakistan to take "quote-unquote" decisive action against the Taliban and other terrorist groups to get in order to get this assistance back. Is Pakistan willing to do that? That's one question. And I think, and then I think the other end is, what level of influence does Pakistan hold over the Afghan Taliban?
Pakistan would very much want to push the Taliban and the Haqqanis to Afghanistan because they belong to Afghanistan. We don't want them to bring stress to our relations with your country and with Afghanistan. We think that they should join the political mainstream there, and we will continue to move on that path, regardless of whether US has a decision on aid or not. We don't want it to be transactional in nature. This is a step that we are taking in our own interests and
regardless of the assistance.
Regardless of the assistance, in our own interest and in the interest of peace in the region. As for our leverage with Taliban, let me tell you that for 2 consecutive years, Pakistan made enormous effort to bring Taliban to the table. The first effort was in 2015, when in a hilly town of Murray, on a night-long session during Ramadan, the Taliban for the first time sat face to face with the representative of the Afghan government. This was July the 7th, and because I was Foreign Secretary then, I was to moderate and did moderate that evening. So I know that
you were there.
I was there, I was moderating, and so were the Chinese and the Americans who were there as observers. So it was a serious effort, and we came out with a joint statement, and then we were planning to meet before the month ran out on 31st July to come up with a set of deliverables. But on 29th July, the news about the death of Mullah Omar was leaked by Afghan National Security Establishment directly to BBC without talking to us, and the whole process got scuttled. And then there was a rat race within the, there was sort of commotion as to what would happen with in the Taliban ranks, and we did not really know what would happen. And then another year passed. A fresh attempt was made, which was that quadrilateral coordination group was formed. 4 nations came together, United States, China, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and we made another attempt. This time we were negotiating who had become then the become the leader of the Taliban, Mullah Akhtar Mansoor. And we had 5 sessions, and on the first week of May, we had the session in which we agreed that all 4 countries would now go back to Taliban, use their own links, and then come back to exchange notes. And on 21st of that month, Mullah Akhtar Mansoor, who crossed over from Iran to Pakistan, was drowned. So after that, Pakistan believes that we have lost any leverage with Taliban, or at least it has gone down that much, because they feel that we push them to a situation where then they are betrayed. Nevertheless, we think that we don't want to give it up. The United States has revived the process of QCG, and there was a first meeting in I think January in Muscat, and in December, sorry. And I think they have been able to rekindle the interest. We don't know where it finally goes, but we know that the only way forward is for all 4 countries to continue to exercise whatever influence they have on Taliban to push them to join the political mainstream in Afghanistan.
Okay, I've got 2 other questions. Given the historical animosity between India and Pakistan, what's the prospect of energy cooperation between India and Pakistan?
Well, of course, India is a neighbor of Pakistan. We need to have good neighborly relations with India. I've always maintained that for that to have, both countries should stay engaged in a dialogue. But at this point in time, Indian leadership feels that they are not ready for a dialogue with Pakistan. Their view is that Pakistan needs to take action against certain anti-India militants that they think live in Pakistan, and as if Pakistan is supporting terrorism, and we tell them, I have personally told my counterparts there, that we have done more than any other country to defeat terrorism, and we will continue to do that in our own interest, because it's a commitment that the leadership of Pakistan has given to the people of Pakistan. But when you suspend the dialogue, you actually give those militants what they want. Every time Pakistan and India come together, something happens, you suspend the dialogue, they sit back and relax, wait for next time you come together, and they'll do the same. So in a way, the agenda of the objectives of the militants are being served by this suspension. What should actually happen is exactly the opposite of that. Both Pakistan and India should stay engaged and work together to reduce the space of militants both in Pakistan and in India. In India also, militancy is growing under the name of Hindutva ideology and others. I think it is a problem that we need to solve by cooperating with each other and not by estranging each other.
Okay. There's a question about what is Pakistan's vision? What is the government of Pakistan's official vision for its future? That's sort of how I take this question, but maybe a little bit broader is how, or maybe a little more specifically is what. And it refers to CPEC. This is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which I think has been a real game changer for Pakistan. It was very notable to me when I visited several years ago, given it was the price tag of $50 billion of investments from China, and China saw Pakistan as an opportunity. What is the? Talk a little bit about what's a positive scenario, economic and political, social scenario for Pakistan. Maybe that would be a way to get at this question, and then maybe you might also just talk a little bit about how does the U.S. fit into there are lots of scenarios, thinking 15 years out or 20 years out. What are your hopes for Pakistan economically, socially, and politically, and how does China fit into it, and how does the U.S. fit in it? Let's put it that way.
Well,
and that's the question for the
All in
audience.
3 minutes.
All in 3 minutes.
All in 3 minutes. All right. Okay.
That's why you're a diplomat.
I have a very concise answer to this. The investment that Chinese have brought to Pakistan, bulk of them are in the private sector. These are joint ventures between private companies in Pakistan and state enterprises in China. And in many of them, many of those projects, I think others are also participating.
Yeah.
And I believe that the future that I see of Pakistan is a Pakistan that is friendly to both United States and China, or to China and United States. I think that's the only future I see for my country. This country we go back in time. It will be such a loss if we were to squander such a deeply dense relationship because we don't see eye to eye on one particular issue. It will be a tremendous loss. It would not serve both countries well. I think it will serve both countries well if we continue to look for win-win solutions for Pakistan, United States, and China, and there are plenty of them.
Thank you. Okay, please join me in thanking the ambassador for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.